I'm here today to talk to you about something that I find quite interesting, programming. You know, I could program any which time and anywhere. My missus, she once said that she came back from work and she used to work late, and I was laying on the bed and she sort of shook me to wake me up. And guess what I said? She shook me and I said, HTML5, HTML5. And then she just like started bursting into laughter. And then she woke me up and said, you were talking about HTML5. And then more recently, while we talk about my sleeping escapades, she said that you were sleeping and you said something like, yeah, I'll build a program in the morning to do that, you know, and all sorts of things. But, you know, aside from that, you know, it's a very subtle introduction to it and it's very bright light. You know, I'm going to have a little, you know, presentation with Bernard Baker. I'm Bernard Baker. So hello everybody, hello LNUG. Okay, so I'll try and keep it light and not get too technical, but we aren't going to do any live coding, but we will look at some code. So you'll be able to scrutinize my code and say, oh, he's rubbish, but I'm much better than you know, and then otherwise look at it and say like, oh yeah, you know, look at that. But I think one of the other things that I would like to say is that something that drives me, you know, essentially is like, people like you, people who are motivated to get together for free beer and pizza, I mean, to come and listen to interesting talks about technology. You know, yeah, but we do like the free beer and pizza. Thanks, Sarah. Yeah. You know, and a big shout out to Trio as well. We were looking into some roles for me, you know, and so let's move on. So hello, LNUG. You know, and we're going to give a quick overview. So today I'll be giving a talk about building an app using Electron. And I won't get too technical because one of the things I've learned in, you know, the industry I work in is that save the technicalities for the programming. You know, don't speak technical to people who don't understand it, you know, because it only makes them look a little bit less more intelligent than you, especially if there's a stakeholder around. So let's move on. And a little bit about me. Why is it always about me? So I'm Bernard Baker. I currently work at Sky. I'm a digital innovation specialist and I've been working there for 3 years. I used to work with this charming chap called Samson, who I trained up, you know, to be a better programmer, who then left, took a 10K pay rise and went off somewhere else. You know, thanks, Samson. But we're still friends and he comes around to visit me and my daughter. So, you know, that's great. You know, when you coming around again? Tonight, okay, tonight, yeah. So Samson's coming home, you're coming home with me tonight. Yeah. Okay, so I've been programming commercially for over 10 years and I'm language agnostic. So then to give you a little definition, if you want to be a good coder, like I was talking to this guy before, you've got to learn to look at the world in a series of programs, interconnecting services and infrastructure. You know, let's not get technical, but you know, if your boss comes over and says, I need that report, then you're the person who puts together a solution to present that report. And you've got to make it as easy as possible for them to understand what's presented in that report. So if they want figures, make the figures a little bit bigger, you know, and don't put the calculations in there. Don't write stuff that they're not going to understand, you know, and then moving on from that. So let's just say that JavaScript is my go-to language for online solutions. And the reason it's JavaScript is predominantly because every browser supports a flavor of it. You may get some variations of web browsers and implementations of WebKit such as Concur who do that sort of stuff, but then you've also got Chromium, you know, so if everybody's familiar with Chromium, well, if you're not, I'll give you a small definition of it a little bit later. And you've got Canary, what the guys are working with, which is like the beta release, nightly release of JavaScript, you know, like running inside the Chrome engine, you know, like, and comes with all the WebKit add-ons and so forth and whatever else you want to use. So then, whoa. That could have hit me, I'm going to sue. So then, other than that, Bash, you know, not the bashing some of you guys are thinking of, but, you know, Bash is my go-to language for Linux server apps. So essentially, the reason I chose Bash is because it's such a great language to work with. I mean, you can write virtually anything in Bash. And then you can just do a change mod, a change own, run your program, and bam, it's running on a cron job. And you know, Merrill Lynch and all those banking guys do it. You know, they run, you'd be surprised how many of their jobs start up as cron jobs. You think, well, what if the server goes down? Well, it's running on a virtual machine, so the moment it goes down, it spits back up again. Your cron job's already listed, and bam, it's off again. Bash, hey, here we go. Cron jobs, yay. So, you know, and I love food, you know, so you may already see if I turn to the side. Wait, let's just get, there we go. Yeah. So you can see the slight difference, yeah. So I love food, you know, and Samson, you know, I love food as well. You know, yeah, because we used to work together, good times. apart from that time he was sleeping on a chair. So let's get started. Let's talk about something interesting. So building an Electron application with NodeJS. Love coding, people. I love coding. So some of you may be familiar with what this is. This is the symbol given to an electron. You know, like in chemistry, or was it geography? I don't know, I failed that subject. But if you look around this, what you'll find is that looking over to the left of the icon, you'll see like what appears to be like an email, a camera, location, some sort of message, some sort of beacon around somebody who looks like a really strange version of Jesus. You know, some stars and pens and some notepads. But if you just look at those, you think they're pictures, but they're actually ideas of what you can do and build using Electron. So you can send email, take photos, anything you can pretty much do in the web, and anything you can pretty much do with JavaScript and libraries, you can pretty much bundle up and throw it into an Electron app, which will run on the desktop. So Electron, you know, what's Electron? You know, you mean that guy from the Marvel comics, Electro? No, not him. Or you mean that guy Spider-Man, you know? Or how about the Hulk? You know, or then again, Super Me. Yeah, now that's what we're talking about. So, hashtag no people, no, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about desktop applications. So essentially we're saying, Electron allows you to build cross-platform desktop apps with JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. So if any of you people have ever come across building a web application, well, let's just say a basic regular website, you know, you put it together, you tend to think of a design in your head, you try and translate the design from your head to the web and it doesn't look anything like it should. You know, then you go about programming, do some CSS, you add some JavaScript, which is for all front-end interactivity, but with the advent of Node, now server-side interactivity, you then produce something which is a little bit more reassuring on the eye. You know, essentially, you don't want to go off and be a great developer but not know how to design anything, because that's not going to get you anywhere. It's really that easy. So like, I'm going to say that again. So Electron allows you to build cross-platform desktop applications for the Mac, Linux, and Windows. There are some subtle variations though in the Electron framework for those different implementations on those different deployment platforms. So then effectively, you may need to venture out and branch your project to sustain or to facilitate certain functions on different platforms. But generally, it does a pretty good job at building cross-platform desktop apps. And it's really that easy. And I'm going to show you how easy it is, because I'm going to show you the source code for an app that I built over at Sky. And then when you see it, you'll be like, oh, I can do that. And I'm hoping that you can. So, Electron uses Chromium and NodeJS. So just to get an idea of Chromium and NodeJS, so Chromium is an open source web browser, pretty much a copy of Google Chrome that you can use in your projects. So if you've ever used Google Chrome, and if you don't like Chrome, then I don't want to speak to you anymore. But then what we're looking at is essentially using Chromium, which is an open source version. You can pretty much download that into your projects and then utilize it in many different ways. But then when you're working with Electron, let's just say that you have a shell, Chromium is your browser, inside Chromium is your website or web app that you built, which you could build for the web as well, but you're putting it on a desktop. And I'll show you a reason that it's been put on a desktop for this solution that I'm going to demonstrate towards the end of the presentation. So you can build your app with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And then also we're going to take a look at NodeJS, which is an open source server framework. So everybody here should know what NodeJS is. So is there anybody here that knows, who doesn't know what Chromium is so far? Anybody raise a hand? Yeah, okay. So then just to reiterate on that, if you imagine Google Chrome and the V8 engine, they package that into an app you download to your Mac or to Windows or to whichever Ubuntu, Linux or distribution of Solaris or whatever it is you're using. You're using a browser. But then if you have a project and you require web connectivity and you want to run things through a web application, then you could download the open source version of Google Chrome, which is Chromium, and then use it in your app to do different things on the web. So you'd be using the rendering engine already built for you in an ecosystem which is widely supported, so why wouldn't you do that? I mean, why reinvent the wheel when you can use the stuff that guys over at Google are putting together for us? I mean, why would you do that? So another thing, Electron, it's open source. It's an open source project. So it's maintained by GitHub. It has an active community of contributors. The online documentation is very useful, so I'll point you in the direction of that and we'll have a quick look at it. And API examples and component examples are available. So let's talk a little bit about anything that's maintained by GitHub. So there's nothing bad with that. I mean, seriously, anything maintained by GitHub gets a thumbs up. You probably have more than 1,000 people willing to get involved and to help and contribute and, you know, add to the project and to improve it. You know, and if you're having a problem with it, you can hit the issues, run a search, and then when you search on it, you'll be able to find and see plenty of different things, you know, answers to your questions. And if you can't find the answers there, read the manual, you know, read the effing manual, you know, like take a look at it. It's really interesting. You know, another thing that you can do is that you can hit Stack Overflow. So how many people here have hit Stack Overflow in the last year? Raise your hand. I like it, you know, I like it. Samson, I don't know if you remember, but do you remember that rule that we had at work, which was the 5-minute rule, the 10-minute rule, when you couldn't solve a problem? Yeah, then you ask. So we said at work, we said after giving them initial training when Samson started, Samson came, did some game development, did some other WebGL stuff if I recall correctly, did some HTML builds. I remember when I was interviewing you, you know, Samson was so shy. You know, they said, was he all right? I said, I think he was nervous. They said, what about, you know, the communication? I said, I think he was nervous. You know, but came on board, stayed with us. How long were you with us for? Like a year and a half? 1 year? 1 year, trained him up and then 10K pairs and he left. You know? All right, okay. So we had this rule at work, which was that if you have a problem and you need to solve it, look it up on the internet first. And but don't blindly search the internet, just typing in random words saying, I might see a code sample that will make some sense to me and I will add that to my code and hopefully it will work because I'm not writing tests, so I don't need to know about what it means. You know? So then essentially, we would say after 5 minutes, if you can't solve the problem and you know what you're looking for on the net, and it's about 10 minutes now, you turn to your peer and you ask them. And the reason you turn to your peer and you ask them is because likewise being maintained by GitHub and it being an open source project, Electron, our developments were maintained by us as a development team, as a small family, a small unit of people who are willing to contribute and help each other when you're in times of need. So then, we also had an active list of contributors as well, like Evgenia, Justina, you know, Moira, if you recall, you know, many other people. And we had a really good balance of like culture fit in our company as well, like in the development team, because I was involved in hiring everybody. And so I made sure that it was about 50-50, men, women, 50-50, and tried to make sure that we grab people from different parts of the world as well. And the reason that I wanted to do that is because I thought that if you were to get all those people together, you know, and they came together to solve a problem, then they'd have that insight and be able to think out of the box, you know, and provide a solution. And also with that is that I could learn from them. So not only was I hiring these people because I thought they were able to do a job, but I thought I could learn a little something from them. Like Samson, I learned not to eat food at my desk, don't sleep at my desk, don't fart on my desk. And also, you know, I also learned to be really humble, you know, in that respect, because this is a truly humble man in front of me. So we're going to move on to the next slide. Oh, you'll be up and running in less than a day. So if you were to follow these 3 simple steps, you'll be up and running in less than a day. First things first, download Electron. Use npm package manager, install it, go and read the API. Now the API is there, it's not a Bible because I'm not terribly religious myself, but I will say, God bless my soul, Hail Mary, do the little dances and so forth. No? I will say that if you read the API and you take a good look at it, it's literally a manuscript for how to do things. And if you literally read the code, implement the code in your own applications, with very little effort, you'll have a working application which is pretty much 80% production ready if you need to test or not. But then if you're coding and you know what you're doing, and you know that if you say if else, you know, you don't expect it to say something else. You know, it's going to be if else. But if you don't understand that, go back and learn it. So that's 2 of the steps. And the third one of the steps is to write things in small modules, implement design patterns. So download it, read the API, program it, and implement design patterns in that respect, because you'll find them really handy and reusable. So let's take a look at another aspect of Electron. It's cross-platform. So it's compatible with the Mac, it's compatible with Windows and Linux. So you can build one app and deploy it on 3 platforms or just one. Predominantly we're working with the Macs at work, so I only built a distribution for a Mac. So then we've got 3 cute little pictures here. So now can anybody tell me, who knows what the icon on the left is? So somebody shouted out, but I'm going to take yours. What's that?
The best and most popular operating system on earth, Linux.
Did somebody boo Unix? Seriously? This man speaks the truth. I tell you. So what's the middle one? Was that boo to Mac?
That's Linux Lite.
Linux Lite, yeah, definitely Linux Lite. One of the worst things about a Mac, right, is that it had to be, I was writing something on the Mac and I was doing a systems integration. And so I'm integrating these various systems together and I'm writing these programs in Bash. Like, I've got it all in my head how it's supposed to work. I do a few diagrams using UML as my notation, collaboration diagrams and stuff like that. And then I'm saying to myself, okay, so I need to write 10 files and literally infer data from one location, process and port that data through each one of these smaller programs, like Unix is written in small programs, and then send it off to an AWS solution, Traffic Live, and use that API to input the data. So, in theory, it all worked really well. In practice, it worked even better because literally, like, the amount of time it took me to write the program wasn't very long. And I had to teach myself a few things at the same time. Like, I had to learn how to use JQ. Anybody know what JQ is? JQ? Yeah, now is JQ not the most rocking JSON like manipulator and parser ever? It runs in native environments on the CI, and I mean, like, you can just pipe information into JQ, filter it, and keep on piping. And I don't mean I'm going to be smoking or anything like that. I mean, like, you can. Everybody know what I mean when I say pipe? Yeah. Okay. Yes. You can pipe all night. Yeah. No, pipe all night. Program pipe. God, you guys. What have you been watching on TV? So then we have the last icon. Anybody?
Wishes it was Linux.
Sorry, what was that? Who was that? Oh, yeah.
Wishes it was Linux.
Oh, wishes it was Linux. Yeah, there's sort of abstract, coloured, funny-looking squares. Those are squares, right?
Why? Because you can put everything in a VM or in a container.
Uh-huh.
Does it really matter?
Oh, now that's a good point. Now, what this gentleman's talking about is that he's touching on some other areas that some of you may be familiar with. So let's say I'm going to start saying something and then somebody just shout out the technology I'm referring to. A big freight ship. Docker. Who said Docker? You. Yeah, Docker. Big freight ship, Docker. So what this gentleman's talking about is that Docker. So then Docker essentially, how many times have you been writing an app and then your development environment is different from your deployment environment, so you have to write a configuration file for when it gets built to change some file paths or some stupidness like that, or even worse, your infrastructure differs from one place to the other, and then if you're running microservices, you've got to put it on several different machines that could have various different infrastructures. So then Docker comes into place. So then, as he was saying, what's the point where you can just put it onto a virtual machine image using something like Docker, Kubernetes or so forth, and then just have the same development environment, as the same deployment environment, as the same testing and integration environment. I mean, it works so well. It really does. But can anybody tell me, apart from this wishing it was Linux, what the icon on the far right is? Anybody know what that is? Can I just randomly ask you, miss? I'm talking to you now. Microsoft, yes, it's Microsoft. What we're looking at here is that Electron, it's a cross-platform solution, and essentially you can run it on a Mac, you can run it on Windows, and you can run it on Linux. So then what I was trying to demonstrate here is that you can bring all 3 of these items together and have one revision of your source code, that you're going to deploy. You just have one aspect, you have one responsibility, and you have one solution which you can then port when it's built, and then build it onto 3 different platforms. But there's a caveat, And the caveat is something I mentioned before, is that there are slight variations in some of the implementations of the Chromium browser for the different platforms. So then there are some things that vary very slightly, but you can always do like environment variables, and if it's one of these environments, just change a line of code or something like that. But then if you wanted to sort of do that more efficiently, you might then say, hey, why don't I put in, you know, like a service object, you know, which is going to evaluate the environment, and then depending on that, run a particular command pattern, which will then implement my implementation of that function for that particular platform, which then you could do in an agile environment. So you could have one guy looking after Linux, one guy looking after Mac, one guy looking after Windows, and then essentially all building towards the same solution. But then when it happens that you need to branch and do those variations from your GitHub repository and branch it, then essentially what happens is that you do your little various implementations, and your knowledge sharing, your stand-ups, you share the insight, and then, you know, you pass it on and everybody takes a look at it and everybody learns, everybody copes, everybody's happy. Hey, let's have a beer. Oh, somebody's happy to see me. So, a simple build script. So everybody know what a .sh file is? Yeah, pretty much, most people? Yeah, okay, so essentially a .sh file is like a Mac or Linux shell script. And the only way you get these things to run, so if you've ever written one of them, I'm sure quite a few people have written an sh file, tried to run it, and then they're like, this command doesn't exist. And it means that you haven't done your change mod, you know, made it executable. But building the app, it's essentially really easy too. So then for the people who can't see me, just imagine my fingers running along the text on the screen. So building is easy too. You simply run Electron packager, hit the dot as to what you're looking for, so your package is right there in front of it. Provide it with a name, which is a Skyworks sprite sheet generator, the app that I'm going to demonstrate afterwards. You want to overwrite the files, so when it does all the, you know, writes all the files and it overwrites everything. Provide an icon, which is the app icon. So if anybody here familiar with making icons on a Macintosh? Anybody here familiar? Making icons on a Macintosh for apps? Not really? Well, what you'll find is that making icons on the Mac, you know, making them, it's pretty straightforward. If you're familiar with Retina screens and, like, you know, different resolutions, divisible by 2, and then you create different size images, then you just sort of like bundle them up using a command line tool on the Mac, and then, you know, it creates a nice little icon file, and then you just pop that in your folder, you know, as the ICNS, and then, you know, you have a beautiful icon basically, in short. So then also we want to do a no prune, so we don't want to remove anything because we need everything, because Electron apps can be a little bit greedy. And then when you want to deploy them, you know, you obviously, you know, you don't always want to prune and remove all the packages because it will just stop working. So, you know, it needs to have its sort of like absolute dependencies in there. And we've also got an ignore, which is followed by what appears to be a regular expression running a group on a folder resources, whatever it looks for, script, followed by a dot, followed by sh, and anything where the gulp file, followed by a dot and a JS. So it's basically saying, don't include the resources, and inside the resources there are videos which I use for demoing the app, and don't include the script and don't include the gulp file when you bundle everything up. So just like it says there, this packages up the app and puts it in a subdirectory. And the subdirectory predominantly will be called the name you give it, which is Skyworks Sprite Sheet Generator. So when it comes to running an app, and we're talking about Electron, so I've given you an introduction to Electron, giving you some history on computing and stuff like that, and then I'm giving you an idea of how to write a build script for an Electron app, and then obviously you already know that you would need to do your npm installs for Electron, the Electron packager, that sort of thing. So then it's really as simple as saying npm Electron followed by a dot, which will run your app. But then you can also use a gulp file to employ a file change watcher, and it runs using gulp serve. So the only reason this runs using gulp serve is because if you take a look at the 4th line, the task defined, the sole task defined in this actual file is serve. So that essentially means when you type in gulp, follow it by a property or a parameter or an argument, and then it's going to look for that inside your file. So then it says gulp serve. What that then does is it says start Electron, so it starts the browser process. Remember we're saying Chromium, so we have a version of the browser and we want to start it up, and then it's going to display whatever we have in our view. And then we want to say restart the browser process if we're watching main renderer or the util or anything like that, then Electron restart. So what that allows you to do is your live debugging. So you can open up the dev tools in Electron while you're working with it. You can have the dev tools open up while it's running the apps. You can see all your client-side development. But then as well as that, if you make any changes to any of your main files that you'll be working with in the app that you list to be watched, then it will reload the app each time you save the file. So then there's also one here which is asking it to reload. So then we're taking a look at the index file or anything that's under the JavaScript file in the public static directory. So then any one of the files that will basically compose of our model view or controller in that respect. So then I modeled it using a model view controller design pattern. I didn't need to implement a framework because I know how to program design patterns, which is something we all should learn to do. And if we don't, we should get together and have like a little hackathon where we all model and create model view controllers in vanilla JavaScript because it's awesome to program. And essentially what this does is that it reloads. So it will reload the app and it will reload the window if any of those files change. So the main files in your build, so then we'll take a look at that, and there's no live coding today. I'm not doing any live coding, I am having a drink. Is essentially this, is that the main files are your main.js and your renderer.js. So then you say to yourself, the main.js and the renderer.js, so then let's take a look at those. We'll take a look at those in a moment. But then also, when building an Electron app, you simply need to store references to the IPC if you want to communicate from your front end to the back end. So you might be wondering what the IPC is. Basically, it's a module. It's like an inter-process connector. You know, it allows your front end to talk to your back end and your back end to send messages back to the front end. And then if you think about it like this, if you have one person on one telephone and one person on another telephone, you can send information across by talking to each other. So then it's essentially the same thing. You can have unidirectional or bidirectional messaging. So let's look at some code and see how this is done. So just get onto my GitHub. So you can see the basic folder structure for one of these projects. We'll take a look at this main file. So then effectively, what I want to zoom in. So here we go. These are some of the things that the API documentation will talk to you about, which is that importing and making use of the IPC. So then the IPC main is used in the main file, whereas the IPC client or connector is used in the other file, the renderer, or in one of your main views that you need to load up. So then now if we go through and we look for IPC again, so here we go. So when we're talking about communicating between the front end and the back end, essentially what it means is that on the IPC on reload, so redraw the application GUI. So then that's all we're asking to do. So then essentially what that means is that take the main window, which we've defined previously and earlier, get the web contents, which they refer to in the API, which you should all look up, and reload ignoring the cache. So then what it means is that get a fresh reload, and that's one of the steps that we'll be looking at later. So we're going to take a quick summary. So Electron, you can create cross-platform desktop apps using JS, HTML, and CSS. NodeJS, all hail NodeJS, by the way, hashtag, is used for the libraries. Gulp is used to run and debug in Chrome. And a simple build script can be used to bundle the app, and you can use a custom icon, which I demonstrated to you previously. But then you may say, what about my views, my controllers, etc.? So we're just going to have a look at an example of that for you. So I'll just show you what this is. So then essentially you have your project folder where it's all built, you have your package JSON, you have a main file and a renderer file, you have a script which you're going to use to build it, and then you're thinking, where are my resources? So you go into your public file, take a look at that, and then you have an index file. And then you're saying, so how does this all work together so I can get up and running? So just take a brief look at that. So then essentially, you define the libraries that you might want to use. So I use some jQuery, use some simulate for drag and drop, and then include a window module to like give it global, for the namespace and like put the scope there correctly. And then I use SVG for the text because I think SVGs look a hell of a lot better than most rendered fonts on the web. And then as well as that, when you use a font on the web, you go to a big company, you load it up on your site and you see this horrendous, hideous looking font, and then it switches to something else. So then I don't like that, so I use SVG. Or I use SVG images in that respect and just load them up beforehand. So then, as you can see here, we're taking the model view controller sort of thing, but we're skipping the model in that respect. But then essentially at the same time, when we do need to reflect and use a model, we can use a renderer or we can store that information elsewhere, but it's not really needed. I mean, the app didn't really warrant the need for a large model or anything like that. So then, what we're looking at is we had a couple of views that we needed. We had a single controller and an app. So then, you basically just reprogram the MVC patterns in your own style, whatever that is, because I would never ever tell people that you have to program a certain way. Everybody's free to program how they feel they should program as long as it gets the job done or as long as it passes a test. So we're just going to go inside the JavaScript folder and we're just going to take a quick look at the app. And then as you can see, this is an immediately invoked function expression providing the scope of this function to this variable app. We require the remote, we require the renderer, we require the IPC renderer. So basically what this means is that it says that all your node scripts are going to be in the renderer. All your node scripts go in the renderer. And then we use the IPC for cross communication bidirectional between the front end and the back end. And look how simple the app is. I mean, it's an immediate invoked function expression. It's a module pattern with a revealer pattern implementation here, revealing one function, which is start, which calls that function when you call the app start, which you may have seen in the HTML file where it said app start. And then it runs in there, and then we simply register the controller, throw a few triggers around, dispatch some events, get the application up and running. So I'm just going to show you a view, and then I'm going to push on. And then we're going to move to see the actual app in action, and then I'll close the presentation. So let's just take a look at this one here. So then I'm really getting friendly with this immediately invoked function expressions. So then what we're looking at here is that everything for the web, when you write it in Chromium, is that you can do it in HTML. But I like to write things in JavaScript because it gives you a little bit more control. So as we just scroll through this, you'll just see there are various functions for doing things such as registering listeners, resetting the view, this particular view, all the variables need to be reset at some point when you reload the app or reboot it. When you want to handle the build view event, how to handle that, how to destroy the event. And then when we look at this, you may start to see things which appear to be HTML, such as set attributes, appending childs, and so forth. And everything looks vaguely familiar. Here's some information about creating SVG text, creating a container, having an embedded font, which is done via base64. And then, moving along, creating gradients. And then as we scroll through, we create some more gradients, and then we put some information on the screen. And then we just go a little bit further. But then one of the things that I wanted to show you was this one here. When we want to open a directory and you want to use some of Electron's native functions, such as opening a directory file system on the file system when you want to use it, you can simply call a JavaScript function on the onClick and then say IPC send open file dialog. And then what that means is that you're sending a message to open a file dialog, and then it runs a function on the back end which opens a dialog for you to be able to select a video file. And that's what we're going to show you in a moment. So I'm going to show you how to process a video and how to convert that video into a sprite sheet which will be used on online display campaigns such as what you were doing before. Do you recall that, Samson? Okay, that's good. He said that he doesn't remember it. That's because you left. The things I had in place for you. No, it's okay. It's all right to leave. Okay, so we've taken a look at the GitHub files, and we've had a repository, where you can store files, and everybody's familiar with GitHub, so I'm not going to go into enough about that. So then you may say, enough already, show me the code. So I'm just going to show you the code for a controller, then I'm going to show you the app. So you've seen the app, you've seen a view, and now look at the controller. So like I said before, using an immediately invoked function expression, we want to register the event listeners. So just to send events around an application in JavaScript, you can just add them to the document level. You can even create your own little particular div in a particular function in a particular module, which will be your API bus for sending events around. But you can just stick them on the model, because running on the ecosystem in which it's going to run, the events aren't going to go anywhere else. So let's not get paranoid and program it like that. Let's program it so it can be free. So if we just go through here, you want to register your views. And then if you want to restart the application, this is what would happen there. If it's a welcome event, if it's a preview event, or if it's going to be a crush event, which you'll see in the demonstration of the app. Or then if it's a success event, meaning that the sprite sheet's been generated. And we return an API, an exposed API on the module revealer pattern, which is these ones here. So register the event listeners and register the application views. So now you've seen a load of code, there's been no live coding. I hope you feel slightly enriched and a little bit more determined to pick up Electron and to use it in various applications, because you can do virtually anything. And this particular application makes use of something called FFmpeg. And FFmpeg, when you want to work with it in Electron, it's not as straightforward as you might like to think it is. So I'm just going to show you what it does and what it can make. So we're going to launch the app now. So working at Sky, they have a theme which is called White World, and pretty much it means that everything's white. So then what you can't see are some of the really nice gradients and colors, but it's a really straightforward, really simple user interface. So one of the developers would essentially click on this button, pick a video, and then they'll go into one of the projects. So I'm just going to grab one for you here. So pick the video that we want to use, and now we're going to upload the video to the server and use the renderer. On the renderer file is where all your node code is. So then if you think about your response and requests and all that sort of stuff, you send it over there. But you don't work necessarily with a response and a request in that respect. You work in the same syntax with a function which has a property error, some values, and a callback function, in that respect, or a next function. So then we're uploading the file at the moment. And then we want to preview the video. So this is a video they were using for Sky Mobile, and I'm sure you've all seen Sky Mobile around town. Seen it advertised somewhere on a billboard, on TV. If you have Sky at home, if you don't, you should get it. It's really cool. And also we're looking at the frame rate. So now we've done that, we want to process the video. So it's going to go off and process the video, and then God bless its soul, when it does that, it means that it's working. And when it's not doing that, it means that it's not really doing very much. So we're processing the video, and what we have here is a preview of the sprite sheet. And I'll explain to you what's happening behind the scenes, and then we'll just do some other stuff. So we've got a sprite sheet, we've taken a video, we've used FFmpeg to split that video down into a series and sequence of images. We store those series and sequence of images on a temporary location made on the fly using Node and the path operator, which basically allows you to create a random file directory, which we're going to delete afterwards because the app can't get bloated. So it has to make something, build it, construct it, then tear it all down and throw it all away each time you use the app. So then the next thing we're going to look at is that, and we're using some libraries for manipulating images. So then I'm going to take this and I'm going to say reduce it down to 50% of the quality, and I want you to pay attention to the estimated file size, which is currently 5.19 MB for a PNG for this sprite sheet, which was done at 25 frames per second, and we're now going to turn it into a JPEG. And we're going to show you the same sprite sheet as a JPEG, which is virtually very little loss of quality, and you can see you can actually see some of the sort of bleeding on the images on the pixels, where it's had to, rasterize and sort of like work out on a bicubic 3x3 pixel grid to work out what's what and where the colors are. So there's a little bit of degradation there. But then at the same time, that 5 has now become 1.05. So we can take it even lower if we needed to. But we're not going to do that because I'm going to close the presentation just by saving this and showing you the final product. So we're just going to call that, so we're going to call it Samson. Hey Samson. And the sprite sheet's ready. So now we're just going to roll along here, and we have a sprite sheet. And that's how simple it can be to create an Electron app that is production ready to help a studio. And let's talk about commercials. So this app saved our clients, in ballpark figure, £65,000 a year. Because the external agencies that they were charging to take videos and convert them into sprite sheets, just like this, they were charging them £500 per sprite sheet. So then when I did the math and I built the app, my operations director said, we're on to a winner, B, thanks again. You know, pretty much, yeah. So I'd just like to close the talk.
Did he give you a raise?
Did he give me a raise? Well, I've tried to resign and he's trying to make me stay. Yeah, yeah. And when I told him I still work for him, he smiled. But that's what we have there. And I'll just finish this off with the resources. So then if you want to get started with Electron, which I really encourage you all to do because you can create great things with it, there's a link to the Electron there. And then another great site is medium.com, which has a lot of explanations for technical things in non-technical language. And this one particular looks at IPC and how it works if you have any trouble with that. So thanks for your time, everybody.